is our second round of UTOOLS sessions, and this is our second session. Today's session is on building your LinkedIn profile and your resume. We have Patience Thomas, who's here presenting. She's with Thomas Consultants. She's going to be our facilitator. As a reminder, if you haven't already done so, please put your name, your first and last name and email address in the chat so that we know you are here. And other than that, if you're not speaking, please mute your mics so that there's not a lot of back noise. This session is brought to you today through a partnership between the University of Michigan Dearborn and a nonprofit called Career Transitions Incorporated. We received some funding through the Michigan College Access Network to offer these workshops. We have them every week. They're all related to college access and sort of like building your personal and professional profile. So with that, we'll get started. And if you have any questions or anything, you can always use the chat, or, you know, I'm not sure how Patience wants to handle questions. If you want people, if it's going to be interactive, if you want people to speak, you know, while you're presenting, or if you want people just to wait until you open it up for questions, just let us know.
Yeah, no, I love my voice, but I love to hear everyone else's voices too, right? So definitely the more interactive, the better it will flow, right? I don't want to just talk at people. Like, I love to have conversations. So make it very conversational. Just jump in if you have a question. Yep.
Okay. And then real quick, the icebreaker theme today was superheroes. And so it looks like most of us have superheroes in our background. I have Storm. Like I said, she looked just like this powerful woman. And so I picked her. I don't know if Stephanie want to say anything about their superheroes that they're presenting.
Yeah, I could talk about mine. I picked Spider-Man. I'm not like real big in into Marvel or anything, but I just think Spider-Man is really cool. I always found him as a really interesting character, and I used to play like the Spider-Man games with my cousins when I was little, so he's a cool superhero. Does anyone else want to share?
I'll go. I chose Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I'm like you, just I've never really been into comic books or the superheroes too much. My husband is. He collects comic books and it's driving me crazy. But anyway, and he's got a few of these. I didn't know these were comics, but we have them. But these guys were real important to me when I was a kid. Always watching the show, had every item in my room was Ninja Turtles. I had Velcro shoes that had them on them. I remember that, and I swore they made me run faster. But kid logic. So yeah, these guys were super cool to me and super important growing up.
Awesome. Okay, Patience, if you want to get started, the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you. I tried to put some superheroes on my background, but it made me disappear. So they overpowered my picture. So, all right, well, I will jump in just by a quick introduction of who I am. I am Patience Thomas, and I have been in HR and recruiting for over 15 years. And what I enjoy most about being in that field is really being able to help people. And so it's my pleasure to come here today and kind of present a presentation to kind of go over your resume, building it, you know, from the ground up. And then also, you know, LinkedIn. Some of us know what LinkedIn does, but it really is a platform for us to showcase who we are on a professional level without actually having to submit our resume. So as a recruiter, for 15 plus years. It's something that's a newer tool for us. Probably it's a little over 10 years old that we've been using, but it allows recruiters to really look at the candidates in the market without them actually submitting an application. So I know a lot of celebrities utilize Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter. Now everything is like wild with TikTok, right? So people are really selling themselves on those social media platforms. Most of them are entertainers. Some of them are starting to, pilot their own businesses or whatnot on some of those social media platforms. So LinkedIn is pretty much what I call a online resume that's always working for you without you having to do anything besides keep it updated. So I have what would a presentation be without a PowerPoint, right, guys? So I'm gonna share my screen here, jumping right in. The purpose of a resume, right, for us that are either starting or already in the job market is really a way for us to be able to chronologically give our employment history as well as our education history to a future employer, right, as well as our contact information and also, any skills or whatnot that we want to highlight. It's something that back in the day, we used to maybe drop off to an employer, or we utilized a fax machine, which I'm sure nobody knows maybe what that is. But now we send everything electronically through email, or we upload it into the company's applicant tracking system, ATS. And sometimes people will let you walk in and drop one off, but it is something that you do want to have that you can print off, because typically when you go in for that face-to-face interview, although with COVID restrictions right now, we're doing a lot of virtual interviews, but it is something that you want to have where you can download and print out and be able to share. What makes a good versus bad resume? Anybody think they have any ideas what would make a good resume versus a bad resume?
Me.
Okay.
I feel like a bad resume would have too many words, and it's like a lot to read, and then they getting lost in what you writing rather than what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And so I will tell you 100% that is the case. We know that, I guess, the more time we have or the less time we have really is something in regards to recruiting. Like as a recruiter, I'm going to skim through that resume for keywords, right? So if you are too long-winded in your resume, or if there's too much content on there, it's 5 pages long, right? I might be like, you know what, this person, no, I'm going to move past that. So what you said is extremely right. You want to make sure that you are selective with your words and don't have too many, but you also don't want to have too much white space as well, because then that can look like you don't have enough content to share in regards to your credentials. So your resume, what it should look like in 2020, which I need to update to 2021. I can't believe it's already 2021. Keep it simple. Like you mentioned, you don't want to have too much on there. Utilize a summary statement instead of an objective. An objective is a thing of the past. As well as pay attention to your email address is something that I want to highlight here, because as I am getting older and as a recruiter, I am learning that not only do we want to make sure that we are professional in our emails, but also think about how technology has evolved, right? So maybe say goodbye to that Yahoo email and kind of update it and have a Gmail, and make sure that when you are putting your email address together, that you try not to have the date of your birth, right? The year or even the month or whatnot, because people will definitely pay attention to that as well. So as things evolve, much like we used to put an objective, now you can just utilize a summary statement. You know, like I am a current college student at the University of Michigan, a freshman pursuing this, or I am currently looking for a position in customer service. Something that is really pointed to the point and direct, like you mentioned, Kiana. All right, spotlight your key skills. Put your latest experience first. Because sometimes if a recruiter or hiring manager is looking at your resume and you flip the chronological order, they may say, boy, this person hasn't worked, because they're not even going to pay attention to looking at the bottom. They're going to look at that very top experience at the top. Break it down, and that meaning in sections, right? So have your statement. If you are pursuing your education or your education is most relevant to your experience, put that at the top. Depending on where you're at in your work experience, whether it is pointed to your career or it's more general, right? Like maybe you're going to college and you're just working as a cashier or a customer service representative. Depending on what position you are looking to apply for, you can change around how you have the sections broken out into your resume. If you haven't worked, right? Maybe you're just going to school, or maybe you're in high school, or you're, starting college. Maybe you've done some volunteer. Maybe you have, shadowed someone in your church or in an organization, or even projects that you've been involved in while you're in school. And so you want to make sure that you have content on your resume. You can definitely add that. And then as you grow professionally, you can take some of that off, but just so that you're able to, highlight who you are as a person and some of the skills that you have learned over the years. And then utilize your bullets as well. So we touched on this a little bit, the format. So a professional email address. And I know Joy asked us to share our email address in the chat box. I didn't get a chance to look at it, but I have seen some rather unique email addresses. And whether you believe it or not, depending who that hiring manager is or that recruiter, they may have a sense of humor, or they may just pass on you, let alone from your email address. So I always tell people, maybe you just want to have one email address for when you're going out looking for a job or putting it on your resume. So I don't know, has anybody else had any funny stories with any email addresses that they've seen?
I have. So we're in the business of, we own a staffing agency. So we're in the business of putting people to work every day. And you'd be surprised how many adults, and I'm not going to say what the email addresses are, but you'd be surprised how many adults, I'm talking like 40-year-olds, that have inappropriate email addresses. And I will call them out on it. I'll say, hey, look, we're a pretty laid back employer, but other employers might not appreciate that. And you might want to think about changing your email, or getting, email accounts are free. Just get a new email account strictly for business. You can keep your fun one for fun stuff, but all kinds of things that you wouldn't expect to see.
Yeah, I've seen some very interesting ones. Like you said, Joy, some people have a sense of humor. Some people are more rigid. And so they're going to, pass judgment on you just based off of your email address. So, yeah. Again, the chronological order is important here. We touched on that. Just making sure that your most recent experience is at the top, so that if you were, looking at a resume, if you looked at a piece of paper and the first thing was 2010, you may not even, your eyes may not even go down. Like you said, if there's too much content on there, people are starting to kind of just skim. And so they may only look and say, oh, they haven't worked since 2010. I've done that myself as a recruiter, looked at a resume and they haven't worked since, 5 years ago. I took a moment and looked down and was able to see, oh, they just had it flipped. So that's important as well. Make sure that the content in your, your job descriptions aligns with what job you're applying for. So the ideal thing is to take time. If you're really pursuing something that you're really serious about, right, you're going to make sure that you're putting yourself in the best, your first impression is a lasting impression, right? So this resume is going to speak for you without you personally being there. So that means, taking an hour to make sure that you look at your resume and look at that job description and say, okay, let me skim the job description. I see that there's like some keywords, or there's certain software, or there's certain responsibility that I've done, but you know what? I don't see it on my resume. You do want to make sure it's truthful, but that way, when I, as a recruiter, look at your resume, I'm like, oh yeah, I can check this box. I can check this box. It takes more time, but you know, if you really want something, then you're going to spend more time, you know, so that you can put yourself in, you know, ahead of the class per se. Utilize bold, italics, and caps, right? So that you can draw the attention to your job description, your dates. Make sure when you put in your dates, right, if you're bolding them, that they're complete and that they're consistent throughout your resume. I know that sometimes we may leave a job in a month, or we may leave a job in a year and a month. You want to make sure that even though you may say, oh, I'm just going to put 2019 to 2020 because I work from December to January, and I don't want them to think that I job hop. It's better if you have that concise date there, right? Because if you said 2019 to 2020 for one job, and then another job that you actually had for, let's just say, 2 years, that you started in April of 2018 and you stayed until April of 2020, you want to highlight that, right? It has to be consistent across the board. And then I know we love fonts, just like we have these lovely virtual backgrounds, right? They're, you know, something that draws our attention. They're fun. Your resume, if it becomes too much fun, it may not be viewed as professional. So you definitely want to stay away from some of the per se fun text options. You want to utilize an Arial or a Times New Roman. Just make sure that your font is also consistent throughout your resume, right? From your header all the way to the job, you know, job details and your education. You just make sure that your font is consistent, and don't have your font super big, right? Make sure that it looks nice on the paper, but I wouldn't go beyond font number size 12.
About how much space did you use between every subheading and stuff, like after the details?
So I would say, depending on how much content you have, right? You want your resume to have a nice flow. I wouldn't say more than double space. Just I would play around with it if you have so much content that it needs to be single spaced. But I would just, you know, if you look at your resume, once you finalize it and type it out, and it seems like you have too many blocks of white space, then I would just make it one single space.
And another question.
Okay.
So like, now I know you said to use like specific fonts and stuff, but like, are those like absolutely necessary?
No, I mean, I would just say one thing about when you have your resume, and if you utilize font from your computer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you upload it to the company's ATS, it may not actually translate into that ATS as nice as it could if it was a standard font that was consistent across the board, right? You may start to see, it may add extra characters. It may manipulate the information that you are uploading when you upload it into their system, because their system or their platform may be set up just to have certain fonts. Does that make sense? Like, you know, when you maybe send, I don't know, a message, a text message or something of that nature, sometimes the fonts can change, or the symbols. Like if back in the day, I think when people didn't have an iPhone, they had an Android, and maybe the iPhone person sent a certain emoji, it didn't come across correctly, right? It would show something different. So I would just keep it standard. Maybe make it, if you really want to use a more stylish font, maybe use it when you print it out and bring it to the interview. All right. What do you think is wrong with this resume?
Fit everything in the middle of the page.
Yeah. It's centered, you know, it's different fonts. It's really not, it's not detailed. It really is kind of like, you know, what is this? Like a fly? It almost to me looks like a flyer for a restaurant, right? Like a menu or something. Like if a quick glance, I wouldn't say this is somebody's resume, right? Like you said, everything is centered. There's inconsistency, right? Some jobs have the actual like city and state, some don't. You don't know what the person's actual responsibilities or job title is.
And the contact information is at the bottom rather than the top.
Right, exactly. So here's an example of something that is attractive to buy. Just like we as people, right, when we see a good looking man or a woman, they catch our eye, right? The same is with that resume, right? As a recruiter, your eye is drawn to something that is appealing, right? That's just human nature. So here, you know, you can see the person's name is at top, right? Their address, their phone number, their email address is professional. And they have a statement, you know, who they are, what they're doing, what they're looking for. Then they have their achievements, the education, and employment. And everything is in a section. It's bulleted. It's a nice font size. The things that are bolded are bringing attention to it. There's consistency with their dates of employment from job to job, as well as the spacing. So I know some of us are, you know, in high school or out of high school, right out of high school, but as you start to develop more experience, you may say to yourself, what should the content of my resume be? How far should I go back? As a rule of thumb, I always tell people to not put more than 10 years. Here it's 10 to 15. Don't go too far back because people, believe it or not, I have in my years of recruiting had hiring managers tell me this person is too old. You know, so it definitely happens. And I've also had people say they're too young, right? They don't have enough experience. But also 10 years, if you think about maybe what you were doing, you know, 10, 15 years ago, is it really going to resonate with what you're doing today, right? Even just in normal life, right? You change as you evolve as a person, you grow, you learn new things, you know, perfect things. So just 10 years back is far enough back. You know, and then also if you think about education, right? If you're in high school, then you would put your high school, right? But once you know, graduate high school and you go to college, you would put high school and college. But once you really graduate from college, then you can just list that on your resume. You don't need to put that you graduated from high school, right? You can just put your college there. So, you know, maybe you put your high school and maybe you get your associates and then you get your associates and then you get your bachelor's, right? So then you could just utilize that. But I would say as far as things that you volunteered for, you know, as a rule of thumb, you could just put those organizations on there, no matter how far back they go. And the reason why I say that is because some of those things that you did as volunteering organizations, you may have started when you were in high school or middle school and continued on those partnerships or relationships going forward. And it allows an employer to see who you are as a person. So they do hire for skills, but a lot of times hiring managers also want to align themselves with people like themselves, or that can bring, you know, unique things to the organization. So simple subheadings. What we talked about is how we've evolved. You know, right now you want to use a resume summary. You want to use your experience, education, skills. You don't want to put about me, accreditations, professional background, or work history. What I did was look and search the good old web, right, to find the most appealing headings for your resume. And so that's what I'm sharing with you guys, not just because I thought to myself, what sounds better, but these are actually headings that are more attention grabbing from employers based in 2020. Also, leveraging your social media. Again, we touched on our email addresses that are professional. So I will touch on your social media as well, right? Depending on what industry or what career path you're taking, you would be selective as far as your social media, right? So I know we're going to talk about LinkedIn here shortly, but if you're someone who is pursuing, you know, a fashion or maybe in the arts or even, you know, something in music, maybe you have a certain website maybe you're going to be a journalist, maybe you have a blog. You could add those links and embed them into your resume so that a person could look at your, your portfolio of work, right? I will tell you, be very mindful of what you put. I'm sure you guys have heard this a million times over. Be mindful of what you put on the internet because it never goes away. And as a recruiter and someone who's been in this industry for a long time, I have seen lots of hiring managers find things, uncover things that I myself couldn't even find about a candidate, and they passed on them. Because they're like, well, if this is what they have out on social media, I don't know how professional or upstanding they're going to represent my organization. I mean, I had a hiring manager one time find a young lady's Twitter handle, and her picture that she had as her Twitter handle wasn't as professional or appealing to this particular hiring manager, and they pretty much didn't move forward because of that. So it's out there, it's to the public. So just be very mindful of what content you put out there. If your social media is private or if it's open to the public. Also, just as well as that being said, any comments that you make on social media also can be utilized. I mean, we do have the freedom of speech, but people also will definitely judge you upon what you put out there, right? Because you don't have a chance to sit down and talk to them right before they have done all this research. So just, I'm going to make my plug. Be careful what you put out there because people definitely will judge you by it. All right. Use a template. I'm sure if you started to build out a resume, you have a template. I always tell people your resume is an evolving document, right? I don't know how many times I've changed my resume, but use a template, but just know that you're going to continuously change your resume as much as you evolve as a person and want to add things. All right. Again, just more information about content, right? Your education or experience, depending at where you're at, in your stage of life, right? You may not have a lot of experience. You may just focus on your education. Again, then you can really utilize like any volunteering or any projects that you've done in school is another way to add content and showcase your experience, right? Because if you put your education and you put your skills, maybe you want to add some more about how you were, selected to be like a project lead in a certain class. So just remember that what's at the top of your resume is really what you want the employer to see first, right? So if you're going for a entry-level position and you just graduated from high school or college, and your major, if you were going to college, maybe you got your associates or your bachelor's, resonates with what they're looking for, then I would put that education first. Again, we talked about, we talked about aligning your resume with the job description that you're applying for, really pulling out some of those keywords. We talked about the format and making sure that there's not too much white space, but enough content so it flows. The career progression, how you've developed. Even if you've been at the same job maybe for a year or two, you may have changed, from one position to another. So that's important to put on there too, that career progression, because it shows the depth of you as a person and how you're able to be, a performer, you're able to achieve, and that that you're making strides within your current company. All right, again, highlight responsibility that align with your next role. And I always tell people to explain gaps in their career on their resume, again, because you're not going to, when you submit a resume, it's like a piece of paper that's talking for you. So if you, took some time off to go to college and maybe you were working, but your school load became too much, you could, put that in there, full-time student right in there. Between jobs. Maybe you took time off because you were starting a family, or, right now we're going through a pandemic, right? So some people have, more fears than others and don't really want to get into the workforce because, maybe they have extreme circumstances with their health that they can't really be, working in the public because of, COVID and how it may impact their overall health. So just, I wouldn't put anything on there that you would want too much of your medical history, But if there is something, you know, especially with COVID right now, that you could just speak to, so that it explains the gap, so that as a future employer, they're able to really be able to understand who you are and where you're at in your career. So the end of your resume, kind of wrapping everything up, the piece of paper who speaks for you without you being there. You want to definitely add achievements with your experience on there. If you have a position where maybe you were, you know, the employee of the month, maybe you had received an attendance award, anything where you can kind of brag about yourself in order to capture, you know, that audience, right? To set yourself apart from the competition. Use numbers to emphasize skills. So I know that, you know, if you are rated, you know, maybe you're in a sales position, or maybe, you know, you were, like I said, the employee of the month. You know, if you quantify, like I was the employee of the month out of, you know, 10 people, you know, like if you're the employee of the month and the team is only 2 people, I mean, there's a 50% chance, right? But if you're employee of the month and it's like a team of 10, or you had, you know, the best customer service score out of 20 people, right? It shows, it means much more, right? Because there's power in numbers. So just keep that in mind. I always tell people when they start to think about their resume, to keep a little notebook or even utilize your phone and put notes in there. Because as you're at work, something great may happen. You may get some great feedback. Your manager may give you some great feedback. You may learn a new task or whatnot. And if you put that in your notes in your phone, I guess old school would be a pad of paper, but in your phone, then when you start to work on your resume, you can literally go back to your notes section in your phone and you can pull out some of that information. Because when you sit down to build a resume, it's so much harder if you just are starting from scratch. So again, make sure that you attract the eye in the very top part of your resume, because most of us know if we get an email, right, we literally skim the subject and maybe like that first paragraph. The same goes with that resume, right? We're going to look at that top content. That's why the most relevant experiences at the top were education. Then also when you're sending your resume over, I heard a horrific story yesterday from one of my recruiters that this person had their resume saved. I won't even tell you what they had it saved, but it was extremely inappropriate. And they just saved it on their computer thinking, you know, I'm just going to save this document. But then when they went to send it, it literally just sent with this, you know, the title of that document. And it was the person, yeah, it was a very inappropriate document title. So just save it something. And like Joy said, she changed hers. I've changed mine. So to keep track, put your first name, your last name, and then the month and the year that you created the document, right? And then that way you can save it. I encourage you to save it as a Word as well as a PDF, because sometimes, you know, your friend might be like, hey, so-and-so is hiring, you know, hurry up and apply, because, you know, like a lot of times back in the day when Chrysler and GM and Ford hired, like you had to hit that career portal right when it opened, because it was such a small window to get an application in there. And so people had to have it ready to go. So sometimes we're out and about, someone tells us about a job, and if you have it saved in a PDF on your email, you can upload it right there into that applicant tracking system, their portal. And most of the time they ask you to sign it in a Word or a PDF. And I would save it to your email. So you have those documents in your email so you can quickly just, you know, shoot it off to whoever is looking for the next rock star.
I got a question.
Okay.
What about like the cover letters?
So that's a good question. So I'll tell you honestly, cover letters, here's my thought on cover letters. Just like you said, you don't want your resume to be too wordy. A lot of times, hiring managers will look at your cover letter to see how you're able to write, right? They want to be able to see how you're able to communicate. So they'll use that as kind of a judge of your writing skills. It's something that's nice to send, but I wouldn't say that you always really need to have that. If the position that you're applying for is something more, you know, in line with where you're going to be writing a lot, or, you know, sending a lot of communication via email or something of that nature, that's where I would say really, you know, pay attention to it and maybe make it longer. But I would say a cover letter should literally just say, hi, I'm so-and-so. I have this experience and I'm available to interview at this date and this time. And then make sure that at the end of that cover letter, you have a call to action. Like, give me a call at this number. I look forward to scheduling an interview. Here's my availability. I can't wait to talk to you. Here's my phone number. Send me an email. When can we connect? Something to really, you know, grab their attention to say, okay, I got to move forward with this person because they're asking me to do something. But cover letter, oh, I'm sorry.
Ms. Thomas, and actually I'm the director for the Office of Trio Programs
Okay.
Perry Boyd at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. And I'll go through hundreds of resumes and cover letters, and I will agree with Ms. Thomas. Cover letters should be very short and concise. I wouldn't have a cover letter more than a paragraph, because it actually, when I see cover letters that have too much information, I'm likely not to even look at the resume. So yeah, so I agree with everything she's saying. Cover letters are not as important, I think, as people think they are.
Mm-hmm.
But the quality of the resume to me is far more important.
Yeah. And also, I think, like you said, Perry, like, we are on the move as people nowadays. Like, we are really moving faster in a lot of different ways of life, right? Like, you think about it, how many times do we really pick up the phone and call someone, right? We text people, right? People can leave me a voicemail and I may or may not listen to it. I may more so just call them back. So that's just like, we're evolving in our communication, straight to the point, get to it. I would say that it's something that I've heard is more millennials like to be, you know, really quick, right? Their response, and they have not a lot of patience. So that to me is like, just get to the point, and that resume is going to pretty much showcase all of the experience and education that you have. The cover letter is just kind of like that cherry on the top. It doesn't have to be a full Sunday, but I'm gonna, just because I know time is limited and I want to go through our LinkedIn presentation, and you guys feel free to jump in with any questions here too. But all right, LinkedIn, if you don't have it, I would say get it. Start to build your network out now. It is a working resume that is always accessible to people to look at, right? LinkedIn has made so much money selling their LinkedIn recruiter seats to recruiters. It is the #1 tool right now that recruiters utilize to find candidates, to find passive candidates, right? A passive candidate is someone who's not applying to the job, but is just sitting on LinkedIn with their pretty picture and their resume pretty much on this website, right? So if you don't have one, look it up, start to build your network. Don't be afraid to add your professors, you know, people that you go to church with, people at companies that you're targeting as a future employer of yours. Maybe you have built out like your top 10 companies that you want to work for. Start looking and finding those people and adding them to your LinkedIn once you get it nice and polished and professional. And how can you do that? Well, I'm going to walk you through that here. Again, the purpose of LinkedIn, we kind of went through it. It's a tool to help us professionally, and how it should look. I'll go through that. And how much time should I spend on LinkedIn? It's really up to you. But I would tell you, as you're starting to build your professional network, I would add as many people as you can that are relevant within, you know, the industry that you're focused in, as well as maybe your, you know, the education, and people, you know, in similar careers that you guys have. All right. So building the perfect profile, right? We want to have a picture. You want to have a headline. You want to have a summary. You definitely want to have your contact information, because if a recruiter wants to talk to you, they need a way to contact you. You want to have your experience, your skills and endorsements, which we'll go over, and you want to have connections, right? Like friends. The good thing is, if you build out that solid resume, you can cut and paste and kind of put some of that content into your LinkedIn profile. So it's kind of like a building block from your resume. So I'm sure you guys probably don't recognize me in this picture. Maybe you recognize Perry, but that used to be Perry's LinkedIn picture, that one there. But he's updated it since then. And then here's my picture here with my hair in a different style. But if you look at these pictures, right, the person in the middle is probably the most unprofessional, right? Unless he's a dog groomer, right? Maybe he's a dog groomer and that is, you know, his business, his industry or whatnot. But if you think about your LinkedIn picture, it is, to me as a recruiter, I am looking at that to say, how is this person going to show up for their interview? So, you know, you don't have to be super fancy and go get a professional picture taken. You can literally, you know, put a blouse on, a dress shirt on, and stand against a blank wall at your house and have someone or yourself take a selfie and, you know, upload that into LinkedIn. So some people pay to have their picture taken, but it's not necessary. As long as you have a nice, clean picture, you don't want to get a cropped picture of you at a, you know, social gathering and cropping somebody out. Just think about how I would want to walk into my interview is how you would want to showcase yourself on here. So just make sure that that picture is professional, and you don't need to have your furry friend in the picture. All right. So read all about me. Again, this is a way for us to be able to showcase ourselves on a social media platform that's always available for someone to search and find content about who we are and what we're doing professionally. So your headline is going to be underneath your name. It's usually 1 to 3 lines. You want to make sure that the content there is, you know, true, but it's catching, but it's not full of a bunch of different symbols or bullets or unique characters or emojis or anything, you know, something that's like a call to action, but how you could benefit a company is what you would want your headline to say. You know, like if you're a go-getter, a team player, you know, someone who is disciplined, detail-oriented, talk about that, highlight that in that headline, because and also the industry and specific role, because that is how we as recruiters are able to search and identify people, right? We're not going to search by, you know, your first and last name, right? We don't know who you are yet, but we want to be able to identify you, and that's how we're going to identify you, is by keyword searches. So here you can see this is kind of who this Andrew Ford is, right? He's an expert in marketing strategy, right? So if I was, you know, doing a key search on marketing strategy as a skill, it would pull him up. He uses personal branding and LinkedIn to help business clients attract more opportunities, right? So he's telling you in a very short snippet, he's an expert, he's bragging about himself, and he's telling you what he does, right? In less than 20 words. All right, so the summary, it is your resume. So here we go with the summary, right? This is just like a small little paragraph. It can be very similar to the summary that you put on your resume, but it is going to be in first person because it's personal, right? So if you're a student, you can say, you know, I'm a student at this university, I'm pursuing this, you know, focus, right? So marketing, and then what makes you great. You talk a little bit about yourself with bullets, and you can break up your summary on your LinkedIn profile where it can have, you know, maybe 2 or 3 sentences and then some bullets, right? Because maybe the bullets that you have, you don't want to get too long-winded, but you definitely want to call attention to those keywords. So there's different options there. Sometimes I have seen people actually put their contact information, right? Like if you're really aggressively on the job market, you really want a recruiter to be able to not have to wait for that connection, right? Because when you get on LinkedIn, you create your profile, people have to connect with you. And once they connect, then they're able to get your contact information. But if you embed in your summary your email address or your phone number, they don't have to wait for you to say, yes, I want to connect. They can literally just pick up the phone or send you an email, which in my world as a recruiter, that's the most beneficial, right? Being able to really just say, oh, I can call this person right now and get them on the line. So I would definitely say in your summary, put your, who you are, where you're currently at in the, your stage of your life, some bullets around what type of person you are, what type of employee you are. And then also put something in there with your, maybe you don't want to put your phone number, right? But just put, your professional email address in there again. Sample summary, here's another copy of this. And I can send this out in a PDF so that you guys can have a copy of this. As you start to build it back, it'll be a nice reference guide for you to have. So your contact information, just like your resume, if you don't put your contact information on there, they can send you messages, but on LinkedIn, once you do approve their request, but they can also view your email and their phone number, so they can just pick up the phone and call you, send you a link to apply to a job, send you a communication via email. Experience. I'm running through this fast, guys, so feel free to stop me. I am going to send the presentation. I just know everybody has a time limit, so I just want to make sure I'm mindful of that. On your experience, this is where you're going to put pretty much what you put in your resume. You may want to not make it as long, but it's definitely where you're going to be able to showcase your employment experience. The nice thing about LinkedIn is when you put in the actual university maybe that you attended, or when you put in this company that you work for, it populates and allows that company's logo to be showcased on your LinkedIn, which makes it look nice and appealing to the eye. All right. So in regards to your experience, again, this is another part of that header section on LinkedIn where you can put the information as far as your company summary, your responsibilities, and then also I always tell people with achievements, any special projects or anything, you can bold that and embed that in there as well. So then people are like, oh, they not only, work for this company, they had this role, but they had a stretch project, right? They were able to go outside of their normal confines of their role, and they were able to stretch and be, on a certain project or whatnot. Like in HR, you may have one function in HR that you're responsible for, but you may stretch and support, another initiative that is important for that company or something that they're, rolling out. So you may have typically been in payroll, but maybe stretched and worked on an initiative for benefits or something of that nature, which shows that you're someone who wants to take on new tasks and you're open to new opportunities within the confines of your current role, but you're able to take on more responsibilities. Again, the purpose of LinkedIn is really a social network website that is utilized by recruiters. They have made a lot of money leveraging this platform for recruiters to find you as the candidate, right? We used to use Career Builder, we used to use Monster, and really those websites are not used hardly at all. We are competitive when we say that LinkedIn recruiter seat is between $9,000 and $10,000 a year to have a license for. So they're making a lot of money, and the recruiters want to have a LinkedIn recruiter seat so they can find the candidates on their website. There's a lot of value. So there's a huge return on investment. So like I said, get that LinkedIn polished and presentable, because that is where companies are looking for candidates, passive candidates. Skills and endorsements. So you as a person have certain skills. You would list those skills on your LinkedIn. And then as a connection, myself, I could go in and endorse you. Maybe you were my recruiter and I felt like you had overall great customer service. You were very professional. You were very nice. You were knowledgeable of something. I would endorse you on that particular skill. And then that is kind of almost like references per se, without me as a future employer, calling your references. I can look on your LinkedIn and say, oh, okay, they have been endorsed for these different things. So they must know what they're doing. So, all right, a connection, right? So this does happen. You could have a long lost friend, that could be a connection. I would steer away, but yes, it does happen with dating. Like people do go on there, just like with any, I think, scam or anything. There are people that will try to, inundate your inbox with things of that nature. And dating, also sometimes you'll have people from other countries reach out. So you do have to be mindful of scams. Your grandma, you could connect with her, right? She might have a profession, right? And have some value add. Your college professor would definitely be someone I would say to, add on your network, even your minister or pastor, and definitely your old boss, as long as you have that person in good standings, I would say. All right. Types of connections. So LinkedIn has first, second, and third. And that means pretty much you're connected to a person. And then, like, say, Alexandra and I were connected, and then Alexandra was connected with Stephanie. Then Stephanie would be a second connection to me because we have a person in common. But a third would be someone that we don't have any connections through. So you will also not have visibility to certain people on LinkedIn if your network is smaller. So the more people that you add to your, your LinkedIn, the better off you are. All righty. So here's kind of an example of a LinkedIn snapshot of someone's profile, right? You got a nice photo there. Their name is there. It's only their name. It's not, a nickname or anything of that nature. It's their government name. You got their headline, which is catchy, right? The media calls me Canada's #1 LinkedIn expert, right? You have one use of a special character. Down here, which we didn't talk about, there, this will say 500 plus connections. Once you hit 500, it will never be larger than 500. It'll only say 500. So sometimes if you're going into a sales role, particularly in sales roles, if you don't, or even in recruiting roles, if you don't have that many connections, sometimes they will kind of frown upon that because they feel like you're not as active on social media like a LinkedIn or whatnot. So if you're going into a sales role, sometimes they want to see, a lot of connections. Other industries don't pay as much attention to it. But again, you are missing out on opportunities if your network isn't as big as it possibly can, because, recruiters, as well as your peers, even, there's other speaking engagements that as a professional, you start to build out, your professional portfolio that you could be, invited to, or trainings and whatnot. So connect away. All right. Again, here's just kind of the information where you can put your contact information, put your email address, again, as long as what you're putting out on the social media is relevant to your professional background or what you're trying to promote in who you are. You could put your Twitter hang tag, you could put any websites, a blog if you're going to be a journalist, or anything that you want a future prospective employer to have access to. I will put on here. I will guard against anything that you want to keep private, because if they go out and find it, that's one thing, but if you give it to them, that's something different. And anybody has accessibility to see your contact information if you connect with them. Something else, just like we think about how celebrities stay relevant, right? They stay in the news. The same is if you want to be on LinkedIn and have a presence, right? The more exposure you have, the more opportunity you have to connect. You want to pay attention to your feed, which is similar to like an Instagram feed or a Facebook feed, where you're going to have stories or posts that your network or people that you're connected with or companies that you follow are sharing. And then that is where you can connect with more people. You can also add comments. Just know that once you comment, it is being seen. And I will tell you, I supported a client, and this person was at a director level, and they were supporting another client, and they made a comment on the company's page. And pretty much at that level of director, you would think that they would have a little bit more knowledge of kind of like what they're putting out, being careful. They didn't. And that person was blocked from actually moving up into the organization because they felt that their commentary on an actual LinkedIn post wasn't aligned with the company's mission and goals going forward. And so it cost them that opportunity to be promoted because of it. So it does happen at different levels. People really do pay attention to it. I'm sure you guys, if someone likes someone's picture on Instagram and maybe they're in a relationship, that becomes like a topic of concern. It's the same thing in a professional setting. It really, people do pay attention. If you like something, if you share something, you will start to see a lot of people start to post some of their political views and a lot of commentary about take that off of LinkedIn because this isn't the place for it. It is communicated on there. But some people don't care about their image. But LinkedIn, again, is something, it is your social media presence. So just be mindful of that. This is a summary, kind of walking you through the different areas, again, of how you want to build out your background. And I will share this with you guys so that you have it, just utilizing keywords so that future employers can search you through finding that. Make sure that you write it in first person and that it's not completely just 100% a cut and paste from your resume. And then definitely speak to anything as far as any achievements or anything that you've done that makes you look the best and set you apart from competition. All right, some do's and do nots, right? Definitely get recommendations. Those are like references that are put on your LinkedIn profile. You can ask for them from people that are within your connections, and they can literally post something on your LinkedIn profile, like a little snippet, like a 1 to 2 sentences that talks about how great you are. I would tell you to keep up to date on your notifications so you can be top of mind and be active on LinkedIn. Do use some eye-catching characteristics, but don't make it like, no one wants to get like a text message that has 50 emojis in it. There's got to be some value add with some context to what you're putting out there. Make sure you put your contact information on there. Don't just use a default headline. Don't just try to throw a whole bunch of stuff into your LinkedIn, a bunch of keywords, because then it can kind of get, what's the true value there. Don't go back too many years. Don't skimp on the details. Don't undersell yourself. And do not use a cropped picture of you and your ex, or you and your prom date, or you at a wedding. Try to just, find a blank wall at your house. You can take a quick selfie and upload it on there. And that is all, folks. I'm open to questions, concerns, feedback. I'll also send a copy of this over to whomever would like to distribute it to the attendees today.
You send it to me.
Send it to you? Okay.
Okay.
We are also going to add them to our website and our social media. So if you follow that, you will find all the stuff on there as well.
Alex, do you want to talk about social media a little bit?
So basically we are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of which is the Facebook and Instagram is on UTOOLS College Prep. Our YouTube channel is UM Trio Programs, and you can also find us on the UM Dearborn website. If you need to contact us for anything at all, you can contact us under utoolscollegeprep@gmail.com. You can also follow our sponsor, MCAN at MI College Access. And yeah, we post pretty regularly. You will find flyers for both our events as well as different events that have resources to like scholarships or, college assistance, so on and so forth. So yeah, give us a follow.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you so much, Patience, for the information that you presented to us today. It was very informative. So for the participants that are on, of course, we've got another session next Tuesday. Alex, what's the topic?
I got the topic. I pulled it up. It says interviews and application process, employment in school, Dr. Gibbs Gray.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was on my email. It was no big deal. Well, it was a pleasure. I'm going to drop, and I wish everyone a beautiful day. The sun has been shining, so I'm happy to say that in Michigan, things are thawing out. It's been a pleasure.